compact the soil, we reduce that pore volume, not only reducing the oxygen available to the roots, which they need for respiration and activity, but also increases the penetration resistance so that the plant root can't explore the soil or grow through the soil. And so with that restricted root zone, the plant will take up less water, take up less nutrients, will reduce crop yield. Well, the best approach for getting rid of compaction is to never do it in the first place because it's a relatively permanent effect. We can't expect that freezing and thawing, wetting and drying is going to quickly relieve the compaction that's out there. So if a farmer can control their traffic, reduce their load limits, stay off wet soils, that's what we recommend.
This year we had a couple of farmers speak on their use of cover crops. That's been kind of a hot topic in the area. People want to know more about them. They're kind of tough because using cover crops, it's not like there's a real place that you start. So we brought in a couple farmers to talk about their use of cover crops and how they've been doing it over the last several years. And a couple of things that they said really resonated with me as far as their use of cover crops. And one was that I had asked them at one point, would you guys still use cover crops if you did not have livestock? And they said, yes, absolutely. The top 3 things that I would recommend for somebody going into cover crops would be first that you identify your goal. What are you trying to do with those cover crops? Is your primary goal to hold your soil in place? Is your primary goal to dry the soil out because that field has been prevented plant? Is your primary goal to diversify your rooting system so that you have multiple organisms that can feed on those roots and make your nutrient cycling more efficient? So once you identify the goal, it's a lot easier to call a seed company and get the right mix for you for the right reasons. The next thing you should do is look at your system. What is your rotation? How can you incorporate those cover crops into that rotation? Are there adjustments you need to make? Do you need to add wheat back into a corn bean rotation? What do you need to do to start making the cover crops easier to use? And then the last thing I think is figure out the resources you have in the area. Is there another farmer that can help you if you don't have the equipment? Come in and see that cover crop, or use the other farmers that may be using cover crops as a resource and somebody to bounce ideas off of. And I think once you start with that process of first identifying your goal and then figuring out how to fit it in your rotation and then figuring out who's doing what you would like to start doing, once you identify those things, it's a lot easier to get into cover cropping than you would think.